Morning, everybody. The world has become so disparate. Haven't you noticed in the news? Aren't you a bit sick of the news these days? Everyone is going in so many different directions. There seems to be less and less teamwork. And one of the challenges, of course, is that all of our teams have been going through some quite challenging experiences over the last few months, as have we. And those experiences they've had, the challenges they face, will be different from one another. So we need to make sure that if we're going to return to work strongly and effectively and efficiently, we need to make sure we're super careful about the way that we communicate. And I love this quote that you see on the screen here. You can do great things I cannot do. I can do great things you cannot do. Together, we can do great things. And that's really the purpose of this webinar we have today with Angela Massey, who is People and Innovation Director with the Innovation Beehive. My name is Zach Curtis. I'm Capability Director with the same company. And Angela, if you could just move on to the next slide there. Thanks. Most of you know us. Welcome to the webinar. The webinar will take approximately 55 minutes, I think. We are specialized in innovation, leadership, and culture, and supporting a wide range of businesses to have the best possible culture coming back from COVID, the best possible leadership coming back from COVID, and helping teams to innovate strongly across a massive range of industries, all of whom are facing similar challenges to all of us together. Good. So just as a quick reminder, I'm sure some of you have been on our webinars before. So Angela, if we can move on, that would be great. We've been running through the roadmap through uncertainty. And again, I'll keep it brief because I'm sure you've heard this before. There are 4 stages to the roadmap through uncertainty, and that's stabilize, sustain, return, and renew. Stabilize was that part when COVID hit us, and we were all just scrabbling around to try to work out exactly what was going on. What did it mean when we suddenly went through this big change? Sustain, the second stage, is when we were all trying to keep our heads above water, when we were all trying to work out exactly what was sustainable, what we could achieve by cutting costs or just trying to remain afloat. Return is the stage that most of us are in right now, and that's the part where we try to reassemble our businesses into the next normal, the next way of doing things, before we move on to renew. And renew is through the rest of the year. And as I mentioned, right now, most of us are in that stage return, where we're trying to then rebuild ourselves so that we can return as strongly as possible. And this webinar is all about how we can best get our team to practically work well with each other as we move forwards. Angela, if we could move on to the next one, that'd be great. Why? Well, because as I mentioned at the beginning, if we look at this change curve here, most change curves are sigmoid curves, S curves, even Kubler-Ross. So it's all about understanding that our different team members and us are all on different days on a different part of that change curve. And the more we can understand that, communicate with each other effectively, the more we can use even tools to help align ourselves, then that means our team will be stronger in moving through return and out beyond to renew our businesses going forwards. But it's not actually about me today. I see Angela on the camera there, looking very educational with the books in the background there, Angela. Perhaps you'd like to tell us exactly what we've got to expect today.
You've fallen for the trick. You think that's a real bookcase behind me, don't you? But
It's one of those visual backgrounds.
Yes. Great, thank you, Zach. As Zach said, I'm the People and Innovation Director at the Innovation Beehive. And what Zach and I are going to share with you today is, up to now, we've looked very much in our webinars at how we need to be as leaders, how we need to be as teams going forward. And today we want to look at, in more detail, is how do you actually help individuals move forward. So we're going to do this through the lens of the innovator's profile. So we're going to look at really understanding what is it that individuals need, with specific reference to what's their attitude to change, how do they cope with stress, frustration and conflict, and what you can do to support them and support yourselves, of course? And also, how best do they thrive? What kind of leadership style do they have? What do they need from leaders, and what do they need from their teams? So, and we're looking at, as I say, we're looking through the lens of the innovator's profile, but we're looking specifically at what do these different personality types, these different thinking types, what do they need in the return to work? And I put returning to work question mark, because a lot of us are still working from home with our bookcases behind us. Some people are working staggered shifts. Some people are working Monday, Tuesday, Friday morning, while others have their desk on another day because the offices just aren't big enough for us all. So what is it like leading and working in a distributed team? So what people have told us their biggest challenges to do that are, a lot of them are very practical. So where do I work? When do I work? How do I get to work? Is it safe to travel to work? Is it safe when I get to work? What do I do about childcare? I mean, some of us are still homeschooling, but in a week's time, it'll be the summer holidays. Now, is your childcare in your bubble or not? So there's a lot of practical things that people need to get their head around. In terms of the team, what we're hearing and seeing is a lot of roles having to flex, because some people have been doing 3 people's jobs while other people have been furloughed or shielding. And now people are coming back saying, wait a minute, I want that bit of my job back, or, you know, who is now doing what? We've got people saying, well, I was working from home. I was nice and autonomous and I got things done. Why do I now have to come to the office? Why are you now telling me what I need to do? And of course, our customers have been impacted too, and our suppliers, the whole supply chain. So how is that affecting our teams? Within that, a lot of the biggest emotions that are coming out are anxiety. So, you know, the obvious worry about our health, our jobs, and so on. Some of us relief that, yes, we have got our health. You know, everyone we know is well, and we do still have work to do. With some, there's sadness about they may have lost someone, they may have know someone who's lost their job. And then there's also a lot of resentment around of some people have an image of those who've been furloughed as having a nice long summer holiday. Others are, well, how come you got to stay at work and I had to stay at home? So there's a lot of that going on. So how do we deal with that? Now, do we have a poll, Zac?
We do. We do. Yeah. Fascinating. It's almost like we coordinated it.
It's like we planned this. We'll talk about planning later.
So in this poll, we'd really love to know how you think your team are feeling, and whether or not you know that. So how well do you know how your team are feeling, especially if they're distributed? I see we have some people on today who do work with significantly distributed teams across multiple countries. So the first option is, I know exactly how my team or colleagues feel from moment to moment. Secondly, I've got a good idea how my team are feeling at any given time. Thirdly, I think I know how most of my team are feeling day to day. Didn't quite fit on the line there. And lastly, I've got no idea and I don't even know how I'm feeling. Good, so feel free to vote there.
Where are you at right now? Because it might change from moment to moment.
Yeah, and it often will change from because there are also, of course, our regular personal challenges that we face beyond COVID as well, which all add into the mix.
So I think everyone's filled out their polls now.
Yep, so I've closed the voting. I will share the results.
Lovely. So a mix in the middle. I'm really reassured about that, because if you do, anyone who'd answered the first one, I know exactly how my team are feeling from moment to moment. I would worry about micromanagement and have you got them CCTV set up in people's homes. So I'm very reassured that that was a 0, and also very reassured that we have no one needing immediate therapy. So no one filled out the bottom one either. So yeah, a mix of the middle, and it's really difficult at the moment, especially with people, you know, working remotely, being distributed. You know, just knowing how they are. And as Zac shared the curve earlier, it's, you know, day to day, sometimes hour to hour, you can be on any point in that curve. So yeah, it's a tough job knowing how your team are. So thank you for answering that. I wonder if you'd put the same answers if we asked the question about how's your family feeling at the moment, or how are your customers feeling at the moment? How well do you know they're feeling? I'll leave that one. I'll just plant that seed if that's all right. And then we can move on.
If the poll hasn't gone from your screen, do just click, it's ended and de-shared. Do just click the X to get out of it.
Okay, so how are we going to deal with all those challenges? Well, the way we're going to look at how to deal with it today is how do we build our self-awareness and awareness of others. So knowing ourselves and knowing others that we're needing to communicate with, influence, motivate, will really help us do those things. So we want to look at, you know, how do different people approach challenges? What strengths can you use to really support each other? How to get the support you need, and how to give others the support that they need in the way that they want it. So I'm going to hand over to Zac, who's going to talk about the innovator's profile.
The brain. The brain. You know, the brain is fascinating. Most of us have one, and I don't know how much you know about the brain, lovely people, but there's been lots and lots of different studies, some conflicting, some not. But before you jump in on the chat and say, yes, Zac, we want to talk about Roger Sperry and Paul MacLean, as well as some guys from General Electric who conducted a lot of studies in the 60s. I think the theory that a lot of us know about is, of course, you know, left brain, right brain, where the left brain controls the right-hand side of the body. The left brain deals with facts, numbers, details, logic, process, planning. The right-hand side of the brain controls the left-hand side of the body and deals with creativity, spirituality, emotions, artistry, intuition. And that was largely driven by Roger Sperry in 1973. Paul MacLean, in I think it was 72, said that there are three areas to the brain. There's the cerebral, the big bumpy neocortex you see up here when in CSI, and then there's the limbic part, which sits at the back of the head, and the reptilian, the cerebral part deals with higher level thinking, the limbic part deals with more instinctual thinking, and the reptilian deals with pure basic instinct. Lots of different practitioners have bundled those different ideas and us together to form different psychometric tools. And I'm sure you've used them, and I'm sure you do use them currently. But I've got to tell you that the huge turning point in my career, when I was previously client-side, when I went from just sort of regular work, accelerating through then having thousands of people under me, was actually this tool. And an understanding of myself and the way that I like to interact with others, and then how I can adapt myself to make sure that my message, my communication between me and them was much stronger. So whatever tool you're used to using or want to use, do, but we strongly recommend, of course, that you use this, and we're going to give it to you for free in this webinar. You can find it by, not now, but we'll give it the information later on, typing into a browser profile.innovationbeehive.co.uk. That's profile.innovationbeehive.co.uk. It takes just 4 minutes to complete. So we took the studies of Sperry and MacLean and various others, as well as our understanding and our experience of innovation in companies all around the world, to create something originally for innovation. How can we come up with better innovation? How can we tap into different areas of our brain to make sure that our natural preferences, which we all have, weren't leading us in one direction without seeing the whole 360-degree picture? So we created this tool based on cerebral and limbic. You can see, oh, I can't, it's Angela sharing it, but you can see questioning and experimenting. The top part is cerebral. Classifying and interacting, the bottom part is limbic. Left mode is questioning and classifying. Right mode is experimenting and interacting. And the presupposition is that all of us have a dominance. And I'm sure you can think of people in your own lives who think differently from you. They approach the world differently from you. Perhaps they're stronger than you in numbers or technical problem solving, or more in touch with their emotions, or better at painting, or better at planning things and making lists and so on. I know I can certainly think of people who are very different to me. And in fact, one of them you can see on the screen. Her name is Angela, and she and I do operate quite differently. So of course, if I want to maximize my interaction with Angela, I need to be less of what I'm doing now, which is gesticulate and fast, and I need to be more processed and thoughtful about what I'm saying if I want Angela to buy into what it is that I'm saying. Yes, do feel free to take this. We're going to talk about it in more detail as the webinar goes on. Angela, if we could go to the next slide. And we'll look into what each quadrant means in just a moment. And Angela, if you could click through rapidly on this, you get a report which, well, that's too rapid, Angela. You were going through the process there, Angela. That was good. There's a number of pages, so you get an overview of the innovator's profile itself, an overview of this thing, design thinking, which I know some of you on the call know, because we originally designed it for innovation, an overview of the 4 quadrants, your report itself, information about your strongest quadrant or quadrants, and then what you can do to adapt yourself with your lower score quadrants, and then some recommended next steps. So feel free to type that in, and we'll give you the information later on, so you're not distracted from this webinar. Next slide, please, Angela. Right, so in more detail, and again, what I like about this tool is it's based on the physiology of the brain, the actual physiology. Some tools are based on, they're Jungian, but the majority of them are based on the physiology of the brain. So I quite like the factual nature of that. So if you have a preference, a dominance in one quadrant, it might be that you feel that you have a preference, a natural preference for analyzing things, or working with numbers, or being factual or logical, or problem solving, or working to goals, or setting targets, or fixing things, practical things, or theorizing, or measuring, or looking for a return on investment. It might be that you feel you have a preference in administration, this is classifying, detail, control, planning, working to deadlines, dealing with safety, working to a structure, scheduling things, working to a process, supporting others, and being consistent. It might be that you feel you have a preference in the interacting quadrant, which is communicating with others, having strong relationships with others, resolving customer issues, teaching or training, listening to others, working in teams, persuading, or intuition linked to feelings and empathy. It could be that you feel you have a preference in seeing the big picture, in experimenting, in creating, selling ideas, taking risks, visualizing things, playfulness, breaking rules, setting strategy, but not actually, that's the direction, not the steps to get there. So that's pure vision stuff. Understanding concepts and having a vivid imagination. Now, I should point out that you can be single dominant, double dominant, triple dominant, or quad dominant, and each of them have their own challenges. For example, if I was equal on all 4, quite rare, but if I was equal on all 4 quadrants, and I was trying to communicate with somebody who was dominant, super dominant in one, my language to this person who I'm trying to communicate with will be naturally talking all around the quadrants. I'll be talking about the numbers, I'll be talking about process and detail, I'll be touchy-feely, and I'll also be selling them ideas, and it'll be so confusing for them because there'll be too much information coming at them. Whereas if I just focused it in one area in the right way with all the information I wanted to give, then it's going to be much, much stronger. So do you think about, or find out later, whether you're single, double, triple, or quad dominant with those different areas. And just because I suppose it's becoming clear because I'm playing up to it a bit, but I am double dominant, experimenting and interacting, off the chart experimenting and interacting. So when I'm thinking about doing things and communicating, it would be to my benefit and to the benefit of the person I'm communicating with to try and bring in some more facts, to try and bring in some more numbers, and to try to be planned in the way that I'm doing it. And just because, don't worry, nearly finished. And just because I'm double dominant, experimenting and interacting, that doesn't mean I'm all of those things you see written there. It doesn't mean that I'm good at persuading and good at resolving customer issues. I might be good at the other things as well, but just strong on it. Very good. So please can we have the next slide, Angela, which will be brief. Oh, look, there's the thing again. Yeah, so just to put it into perspective, and we're talking stereotypes now, but just to put it into perspective, now that you know my profile, someone who has a single dominance in questioning, when they're thinking about money, they'll be thinking about, they'll know what interest rate they're paying, usually interest rate they're paying back on their credit cards. Someone who's dominant in classifying, they'll know, they'll have savings. They'll have a plan. They'll work to a budget every month. If someone is strong in interacting, they're more likely to be giving to charity or to a homeless person they see in the street. And someone who's super strong in experimenting is more likely to have more month left at the end of their money because they've spent it. Now, my dominance is experimenting and interacting. So I do give money to charity quite regularly, as I'm sure we all do, and I'll come on to explain that. But of course, I do have more month at the end of my money every month. Do you think I know, Angela, what I'm paying back on my credit cards, what my interest rate is?
I bet you don't even know how many credit cards you've got, do you?
Oh, no, actually, I think I've got, doesn't matter. And then classifying savings. Do you think I have savings? Do you think I have budget?
No chance.
Yeah, no. I mean, these are stereotypes. And the reason why I said it depends is because we are all made up of all four quadrants, just to greater or lesser degrees. So I do have ability in questioning and classifying, but it's not as strong as the others. So of course I might have savings, but it's more likely, stereotypically, that I'm just going to be spending and then giving to charity and so on. So it's really interesting to see how it plays out. So hopefully you've got a bit of an idea there about the four quadrants and what they mean. We're going to be digging into it over the coming slides. So it's probably a good time for me to hand back to Angela.
Thank you very much. So I'm sure a lot of you will have completed your innovators profile before. So that's a recap for those and an introduction for those that haven't. Don't worry if you haven't, because as we go through, you'll be getting more insight into the different quadrants, and you can have a think about, oh, is that more like me, or is that more like other people you know, colleagues, family, customers? So
did I mention it's free, Angela?
I beg your pardon?
Did I mention it was free?
Did you mention it was free? Is it free?
Free.
That's amazing. Everyone should do it. Okay, I think there's no question that we're going through a time of change. Do we want to debate that one? No, I don't think so. But what we'd like to ask you is, we're going to do it as a poll, I think.
Now?
We're going to do change as a poll. We're going to ask people about how they like change. Here we go. Here we go. The question we've got for you is, when change happens, what is it you most want to know? Do you want to know when it's happening, who's involved, how the change will be managed, or how much fun we can have with it? Go with your gut. Go with your gut on this one, because you might want to know all four, but what's the first thing that comes to you?
Now, I think with this, Angela, we've sneakily forced them to make one choice as their dominant preference.
We have. We've manipulated you. Okay, we have answers already. So the biggest score is when it's happening. Nobody said who's involved. And an equal number of how the change will be managed and how much fun we can have with it. So, given that there are four answers and four quadrants, those of you, the logical thinkers there, will probably think that we've planned this to get you to pick possibly your highest quadrant. So I'm going to stop sharing the results, and we're going to look next.
I have to admit, Angela, linked to my profile, that I would have picked how much fun can we have with it immediately, which is no surprise.
Without a question.
Yeah.
Without question. So we're going to look at how the quadrants deal with change. Can anybody hear singing in the background?
No, are you singing?
No, that's all right then. My daughter's about to have a singing lesson. Okay, so you remember the four questions: questioning, experimenting, classifying, interacting.
Yeah.
What we're going to do is look at each of these quadrants and their attitude to change. Now, as Zac has said, we're made up of all 4 quadrants. So we're going to look at sort of extremes. So, you know, people whose sort of strongest quadrant, what does it look like for them? So we will be, you know, we might be talking stereotypes, and it might look a bit extreme, but that's how we want to get it across. Plus the other thing is, you know, we are living in quite a stressful time at the moment, and at times of stress, people quite often, you know, revert to type. So you might see more extreme versions of this than you normally would. So let's start with the questioning quadrant. Now, if you put as your answer when, then you're quite likely strongest in the questioning quadrant. Now, their attitude to change is they love to consider possibilities, evaluating the pros and cons. They will contribute ideas based on facts, and they want to know what information the change is based on. Now, what do we mean by that is they're not necessarily the ones to come up with ideas, but they will explore possibilities of how could that work. Ideas that they'll contribute will not be highfalutin ideas. It will be, right, what are the facts right now? Let's construct some ideas from that. And they always want to know if change is imposed on them, what's the data behind it? Now, with these quadrants, the opposite quadrant is usually the opposite sort of mentality, the opposite thinking. So with interacting type, it's less about the cerebral, more about the people. So they're more likely to go along with the change if they actually like the person who came up with the change, who's suggesting the change. Their focus is on getting others on board. And they do want change to reflect their personal values. So those who are strongest in the interacting quadrant, who are the ones who would probably have gone, who is involved, which nobody did on this one, but that doesn't mean it wasn't your strongest. It could have just been that one question. But those who are strongest in the interacting quadrant, they really are very values based and want any action and any decisions to reflect their personal values. Now, the classifying quadrant, their attitude to change, they initiate and manage processes. So they will make change happen. They'll put the timetable together. They'll work out who's doing what. And what they want to know is how the change will happen. The experimenting quadrant will often initiate change, and they like to respond to what's happening to them, and will often like change for change's sake. So there's no point saying to an experimenter, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because is this right, Zac?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, I've got a good idea, I want to change. And they'd like change to be imaginative. Okay, so again, think about whether you've done the profile or not. Think about which one of these seems most true for you. And what does it mean for leaders? What does it mean for people working with these types? Well, the questioning types, and this is my my strongest quadrant, is I want to know your strategic thinking. How did you get to this change that you're suggesting, that you're proposing? The flip side of that is the interacting. Did you involve everybody fairly? So, and this is really key and really very difficult in times when your team is distributed. Is have you treated everybody fairly? And they want to know that that's happened. The classifying quadrant wants to know, they want clear instructions and they want it to be consistent. So if you haven't made a decision, again, be clear about that, because they will not want you to keep changing your mind. Whereas leaders, leading experimenting types, is you need to help them see that the future is full of possibilities. Because so often at the moment, we're thinking of the day-to-day and the here and now and what have we got to do tomorrow. Experimental mindset wants to know what the future is going to be like. So I hope you've been thinking as we've been going through which one's most like me. And our question to you is you know, do you see yourself here? Do you see people you've been working with here? What's this like for you day to day? How are you finding Zac as an experimenter in the day to day?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think I've spoken about this on webinars before. This view you see behind me, I'm sitting on a wooden chair, which is, sorry, do you want people to send chat information, Angela?
Yes, yes.
about how this plays out for them?
Do use the chat box. Tell us.
Okay, while we're doing that, I'll explain me.
Mm.
Yeah, so I sit in this chair every day, and that's not been the story for the last decade. For the last decade, I have moved from country to country, different country every week, not had a desk for years. And well, I don't really have a desk now, but I'm sitting in one place, which is really painful and difficult because, of course, my attitude to change is I need to keep moving. As you can see here, like change for change's sake. So it's really difficult for me to be in the house all the time. And that manifested itself, Angela, in one Sunday when I had a 20-minute drive from a walk back to the house. And 3 hours later, I was still driving. Wasn't really conscious that I was still driving, but I was still driving because that house had become my office, which I've never had before. My office was always my lap. So yeah, so it was definitely experimenting there. I just like to keep momentum. Onward, as they say.
Yes. Well, we've had some people chatting to us, saying I always thought it was experimenting as I work in innovation, but it turns out I really like the left-hand side. Mm. Well, the thing is with this, it's not about you know, for innovation to happen, you need all four. Yeah. You need all four quadrants to be working. It's not if all you had in your team were people with an experimental mindset, you'd have tons of ideas, but none of them would ever land. Yeah. So yeah, you need all four, and you know, we believe in diverse teams in every sense of the word, and that includes different mindsets, different personalities, because that's what makes teams really powerful.
But exactly. So what makes the teams even more powerful is an understanding, and this is pertinent to this webinar, an understanding of how each other approaches change. So sharing profiles within the team so that we can say, you know, Angela prefers change to be like this, Zac prefers change to be like that. So how can we work together to make that change bearable and actually productive?
Mm. Merck has told us, I can definitely see myself and my colleagues in this. Quite a few templates similar to this. That's true. There's lots of personality profiles out there. I like this one because it's just nice and simple, and you can get your head around it very quickly. So, so shall we see how to help these people?
Yeah.
Oh, someone's put, after 10 years, we finally have a team that includes all four. Wow, congratulations. And it's made a tremendous difference. Yeah. How do you measure profiles?
Yeah, so how do you measure profiles? I'm not, hello team. Depends what you mean by measure profiles. So yeah, if you could clarify what you mean by measuring profiles, that would be awesome.
And Joe's written, one of the things I love about this one is grounding the world of innovation. Sorry, Zac?
Yeah, so we're getting some information through about other tools. And yeah, so basically all these tools are based on two things, as I mentioned before. One is the actual physiology of the brain, and the second one is Jungian. We like the one on the physiology of the brain. So of course it's similar to other ones because it's based on the physiology and the way the brain actually fires. What we like about ours compared to things like Belbin and Color Insights and so on, is that ours is light. And now I mean that in the most positive way. It takes 4 minutes to complete. And really what we don't want to do is to say, Angela, you are questioning. Without a question, you're questioning. And put you in a box. What we want is for this to be a springboard for conversation, a springboard for communication. And what we learned when we launched it at Google with innovation in mind was actually what we were missing in innovation is the communication part. So whilst I'm strong in experimenting, that doesn't mean I'm going to come up with the best ideas. It means I'm going to forget probably how we're going to get the return on investment. So how can I leverage other people in the team, and how can I communicate my ideas to them in a way which will get them excited and interested? So that's why we like it, because it is that kind of springboard into other things. Sorry, Angela.
The thing is, if you're having to come up with ideas on your own, you know you need to go through all four stages too. Yeah. So and a yes to Sam, who's asked, questioning and classifying looks left brain strategy, experimenting and interacting is the more creative side. That's pretty much true, isn't it, Zac?
Yeah, it is. It's somewhat more complicated in that The vision part of strategy sits more comfortably in experimenting, but the execution of strategy and the plan to get there is questioning and classifying. Broadly speaking, the right side, experimenting and interacting, is all about creativity and then emotions down in interacting. The left-hand side is all about facts and logic and then planning down in classifying. So definitely there's a more kind of practical thing on the left, and there's a more kind of spiritual, creative thing on the right.
Lovely. So hopefully we've given you some insight in how to get each quadrant on board with any change you're proposing or is inflicted on you. We have a tool, Zac. We have a tool here.
Lots of tools around this profile. So good, right? So Angela, why don't we speed coach?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, you and I haven't seen each other for ages, but since we haven't prepared a scenario for this, because we want to see what your emotional reaction to it is, that's great. So Angela, in front at the top of this tool, we have an interpretation of the Kubler-Ross change curve. So when change happens, you'll see that firstly there's often shock, then there's denial, then people go down that curve through frustration, sometimes into some form of depression, before they start to then go up the curve into experimentation through making a subconscious decision or sometimes conscious decision to then accept the change and move forwards. Now, in some cases, the curve can carry on beyond that, but because people do go up and down. But for now, Angela, based on that super fast explanation of the change curve, tell me what's going on in your life. Has there been some sort of big change?
Well, has there been a big change? Yes, I've been working from home, then furloughed, then back, and work-wise, a lot of what I've been looking at is, yes, I've been through this curve and I'm very much in an experimentation place of how do we manage to do all the wonderful things that we used to do with people in the room? How can we do it all virtually? And one thing that's at the back of my mind at the moment, because I've been creating, you know, I do a lot of, you know, leadership workshops and team building workshops and what have you, and culture workshops. And so we can do all that virtually. But I haven't had a client yet ask for a coaching skills workshop, and it's bound to happen before long. So how do I do that in a virtual place? And so I'm in that mindset at the moment of
Okay, so what you would do, Angela, is if you had this form in front of you, you'd probably mark down your initials on where you think you are, because it does change depending on where you are at on a given day and what other external stimulus there is.
Yeah.
Remind me, your highest quadrant is questioning?
It's questioning.
Okay, what's your lowest?
Interacting.
It's a miracle we get along at all.
It's a miracle I get to talk to people.
Based on your knowledge of the profile, Angela, with that challenge you're facing and that change, so you're moving through experimenting and trying to work out how clients might benefit from coaching. With your questioning self, how do you think that change could play out? Or what could you do to bring that change about?
Well, questioning is very evaluating. So it would be, so what worked before? What, you know, how could things be improved? What the different platforms look like? How can I, you know, I'd be evaluating different platforms and different ways of doing things.
Okay, so you'd run an analysis of what's happened in the past and what could happen in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. What about your knowledge of classifying? How do you think they would approach your challenge?
This is much more about detail, isn't it, and process, and exactly right. Well, you wouldn't want to be asked to do a 2-day virtual workshop anymore. So how's it going to look as a 2-hour workshop? And really, you know, what could you cover and what could you fit in, and exactly how would it look? Would it be 4 workshops over 4 weeks or what? So looking much more at specifics.
And building out structure. Lovely. Okay, so how, based on your knowledge of interacting, your lowest scored quadrant there, Angela, look inwards, Angela. How do you feel that someone who's strong in experimenting might approach that challenge?
Well, I'd look specifically at, you know, what do people really need right now in terms of coaching? So how to make it really relevant to people, and also talk to other, you know, must know 100 coaches, you know, and we've all done virtual coaching. So what can we all learn from each other?
Okay, lovely. And experimenting. How can you bring this challenge to life in some exciting way?
Well, I would gather my experimental mindset colleagues, Zac, and we'd have fun creating something marvelous.
Okay, so the trick, Angela, is in thinking about your challenge, this change, from all quadrant areas, you're more likely to have a rounded solution at the end, much like in the way that we did with innovation. So then in the last part, had we but willed enough in time, we would then make a plan using all 4 quadrants to try and work through that change and give you some clear, factual, logical next steps.
Yeah, and already I'm seeing it as an enjoyable thing to do rather than one more chore that I ought to do. So thank you, Zac.
You are so
what wonderful speed coaching.
Now, where do I send the invoice, Angela?
Send it to Mark.
Okay, maybe I should just clarify a couple of things, Angela, on the next slide around frustrations. Because of course we already probably on this call, because I'm amping up the experimenting and interacting quadrants. Already some of you are probably a little bit uncomfortable with me and more comfortable with Angela, or vice versa, which is fine. Some of the things which frustrate people who have a dominance in questioning, remember you can be double, triple or quad dominant as well. So what would frustrate Angela about me might be sometimes too informal or too chatty or not getting to the point, or actually I do have a good use of time, so that's fine. Or perhaps not having data to back up assumptions, or using assumptions rather than facts, which is something I do quite regularly. And an unwillingness to debate might frustrate Angela. And similar with someone who's strong in classifying, when it's not clear what the structure is going to be, what the agenda is going to be, having a lack of process, perhaps being disorganized in their approach, or doing too many things at once, so there's an inconsistency in execution of things, unpredictability or unclear instructions. Also, what would frustrate me if I was working with colleagues would be someone presenting me with too much detail. That just blurs in front of my eyes and I can't cope with it at all. Also, no sense of fun or playfulness. I think you can tell already that I thrive when it's playful and light and fun, and an unwillingness to think laterally. When people are so focused on the end goal and the process, they're not willing to veer off and go down rabbit holes. So a lack of flexibility, and having too much structure confines me, as we heard earlier from me sitting in this chair in my house, just basically shut my brain down, and an inability to grasp concepts. When I don't give all the detail, I explain something at big level and expect everyone to get it. And what would frustrate someone strong in the interacting is someone who's really direct and doesn't sort of smooth things over and package it properly. Really blunt criticism or having very little eye contact, and perhaps missing would frustrate some people who are interacting. Also having a lack of personal interaction. Obviously it's difficult to be gesticulate and touchy at the moment, since we had to be quite distant. But insensitive comments as well can frustrate those who are strong in interacting. So that's something that we have to bear in mind when we're communicating with our team, even in a distributed workforce, because we do all have these natural preferences and natural frustrations. Angela, perhaps you have some more information for us on that.
I do. I mean, interesting. When you saw that road closed sign, what was your reaction? Was it, oh dear, can't go forward, have to go back? Or was it, how can I get around this?
I didn't see the road closed sign, Angela. I thought, well, that's not for me. I'll just keep going.
So let's look at, as I said, we know it's stressful times now, and we've all got to be more creative in how we work. So let's look at the different quadrants. What sort of things cause us stress, and what are the solutions for it? So I'm going to start with interacting. Partly because interacting can feel slighted or misunderstood. So I want them to know that they're first. Now, what can cause them stress in times of change is lack of consultation. And as Zac said before, direct criticism. So, do be careful about how you, how you manage them and how you give them feedback. And what are the warning signs that this person is under stress? Do they seem they're feeling slighted or misunderstood? So you might get a tone of voice, you might get a you know, an odd comment, or they just don't seem able to move on, and that's because emotionally they need you. They need to be able to talk about it, and they need you to hear how they're feeling. So you need to be showing a bit of empathy here. Now, you know, I grew up in the Yorkshire Pennines in the 70s and 80s, and I'm a questioning sort of person. So if I can learn empathy, anybody can. So practice your empathy skills, and talk openly with people. They need to be able to express how they're feeling. And if they are feeling slighted, help them to see how their values relate to the solution. So perhaps one of their values is about not judging other people or giving people the benefit of the doubt. So get them to explore their values and how they can use their values to find their own solution. Going up to the opposite quadrant, they can get stressed if we're going ahead, but there's no plan. So they want to know, right, what, yeah, we seem to be going over there, but excuse me, I need to see the map. And what you'll see them doing is they just can't seem to get started on anything. So get them focused on facts, show them the map so that they can take the next step. And then when they're heading in the right direction, they'll be able to keep going. Experimenting, as Zac just shared with you, anything detailed or standardized, do not send a load of spreadsheets to this person. And what to look out for, again, we're talking extreme, but imaginative doom. Rather than using their wonderful imaginations to see wonderful possibilities, they're seeing you know, doom ahead. So it's very tempting to say, oh, come on, normally you're so positive and you can see, you know, the positive side of things. Yes, they will be able to do that, but there's a step in between. So use your coaching skills to enable them to see what's real. So what are the actual facts, so that they can actually get things in perspective, and that will help them kind of flip to the more positive side. And in terms of classifying, what will get them stressed out is just being really vague about what you want them to do, or changing plans a lot. And this is happening a lot in organizations at the moment because, you know, the legal situation's changing, the COVID situation's changing, and so on. So it can be really stressful. And what you'll see with them is that they can get really obsessed over one minor detail. So what they need from you is help them to just make that next decision so that they can move forward. Anything to add on that, Zac, before I move on? I'm very conscious of time.
Nothing
So
to add.
again, whether you're a leader or whether they're a team member, there are specific ways you can help each person move on. And here's one of the ways you can do that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just talk through this tool, Angela, because it's reasonably straightforward. And so when the way that we use this is in a group, actually sharing together, but you can use it one-on-one as well. So in the company, we have a champion in returning to work, whose role it is to actually help everyone communicate better together. So what we would do is, if it was Andrew and I talking, for example, then we'd talk about something that was highly stressful for her, and we would run through what those stresses actually are, what's going on in her world, which we can identify as being stressful for them. We'd list them down in the next column. We'd talk about how that plays out, how it manifests, you know, what does it exhibit when it's there? And that could be behavior, it could be even something physiological. And then the last thing is, you know, what conscious action could we take to solve that particular thing? And the important thing that I would want to get across to Angela is the bottom three words there: stimulus, pause, response. So you know, SPRing is really, really important. Very often the thing that makes stress is that immediate reaction to a piece of stimulus. And the thing about reducing stress is lengthening the gap between stimulus and response. So if we can create that pause, that will allow us time to change the cortisone levels, and to think about what would be the most effective response to reduce that stress. And very often, I mean, you'll all know this already, and I'm only quite new to it, but movement is amazingly good at reducing stress, which is why so many people love things like Pilates and yoga and exercising and so on. But movement combined with the senses particularly really helps to lengthen that pause between stimulus and response. And Angela, if we just move on to the next slide as well. I'm just thinking about, teams, teams and stress, and very often we can use the innovator's profile to leverage people's strengths to help us in stressful times. So if I was really struggling with a particular project, because I know we had to get a return on investment from this project, I know that I had to think through what I was doing in order to come out with something at the end, it might be that I tap into Angela, who is strong in questioning, so that that will add on and support my own strength, which is the two right-hand ones, experimenting and interacting. So it's about leveraging teams as well as adapting, leveraging other people's strengths. We've had a comment here. Is the tool, the stress relief tool, is it more reflective on past actions or a future planning tool? So it's both. The first two columns, Andrew, if you just pop back to the previous slide, just for a brief visit. The stressor there could be, how it manifests could be reflective. You could adapt it so that you reflect on how it has manifested in the past. But the conscious action column on the right is very much about planning next actions to stop it happening again or to relieve that particular stress in a single instance. Okay, should we move on to the next slide, Angela?
Indeed. Oh.
Oh.
Who did that? Okay, so let's look at how you can get. We've talked about stress and hopefully looking at the different quadrants. You've seen how they can really wind each other up and where the conflict could be. So let's look at how they could best flourish. So we're going to look at first of all leadership styles, and so again, you might recognize yourself as a leader here, you might recognize your boss, or you might recognize people in your team and their leadership style, and also then what kind of culture they would flourish best in. So we can look at how to create that culture. So I'm starting with experimenting this time. So leadership style is very ideas focused, it's really flexible, it's really responsive. And the culture that these sort of people thrive in most is one that's really autonomous, playful and enthusiastic. On the flip side, you have got, Zac's nodding there, classifying. So their leadership style, very task-centered, very much here and now. And they like a culture where there's clear priorities, clear processes, we know exactly who's doing what and who's making what decision. So I hope you can see here that if you have an experimenting team, an experimenting style, and that's all you have, again, you have lots of ideas, but you need the classifying side to actually make those ideas, make them happen. So you need a bit of both. So let's look at the other two, which will bring even more richness. So the interacting, so their leadership style, very relationship centered and seek consensus. So they want to know that everybody is on board and everybody's okay with it. They're harmoniously collaborative. Now, what I mean by that is they really want to involve people, and it's not that they won't challenge, but they do want to come to some sort of agreement. They feedback. Their feedback is sensitive when they share it, and what they do like to talk about is how we work. Now, you take an extreme questioning person, and they're very pragmatic, and they're like, I don't want to talk about what we work. I want to talk about what we're going to achieve. Very much a more cerebral thinking style. So they make their decisions based on principles rather than values. They want plans and clear parameters to move forward. And again, if you just had a leadership style and a culture that was like that, you would get things done, but not necessarily as effectively as you could if you used more interaction and really involved people. And on the flip side, if interacting was all you had, it would be a wonderful, harmonious place to work, but you wouldn't necessarily get results. So the more you can, involve all of them and flex your leadership style each time, and create the culture that suits everybody, the more your team will achieve. Here's one way, another tool that you can get your team involved. How do you have that conversation with the team? So getting the team together and agreeing your goals. What do you need to do? How do you need to work together to do this? It just looks like a simple thing on A4, but it can be the most powerful conversation you ever have as a team. how you involve people, going back to the communication, which I think Sam mentioned on the chat and Zac's been talking about, is again, it's selling the idea to different people in different ways. So the classifiers will want to know, as a result of this, it'll be really clear who's doing what. The interactors will want to know, this means we can all work together, in a nice symbiotic way, and we'll all be getting on, and so on. What will the experimenters want to know, Zac? How do you sell this to them?
How can I make it a bit more, fun and useful? And I want to know also about the why. What is the purpose of doing it?
And the experimenters will want to know you'll get better results doing this. So what we want to say is that success is a sum of small repeated efforts. So it's making this a habit. This isn't a one-off. This isn't, oh right, let's all contract as a team now, great, we've done it, let's carry on, because change is happening all the time at the moment. So keep having these conversations. And I don't know how many minutes we've got left, not many. So I'm going to move on to the what next slide. So what I would say is make some time to reflect. So we've thrown quite a lot at you and it might take a while for all of it to sink in. So take some time to think about what we've talked about, and do complete the profile if you haven't. As Zac says, it is free, so go for it. Encourage your team to do it as well. Again, this will give you a language, give you a vocabulary to talk about it. So when you do your contracting, it just makes it so much easier to talk about it. Arrange time for your team to talk about how they're going to work together. And then, if you want to move forward, we'll just give you a real taste of what we do on the workshops. So, talk to us if you want some one-to-one coaching, you want to talk about leadership development, about team building, you want a coaching skills workshop, which I haven't worked out how to do yet, but I will. And just keep thinking, reflecting and talking.
I can't quite believe that we keep giving all this stuff away, Angela.
We're amazing, aren't we?
Yeah. So we've, some of you attended the webinar we did last Thursday. We have created a product which is all about champions that I mentioned before. It's all about making sure, how can we have someone in our team or someone in the company or someone in each team that is responsible but not accountable for keeping an eye out on people, bringing the team together, being the glue between them, so that all of this communication stuff that we've been talking about today comes to life and continues to come to life. And it could be that the champion is you. It could be the champion is the team manager. It could be anybody, but it's usually someone who has a natural affiliation or a natural affiliation with some of the good well-being things. So there's someone in our team who's great at naturally thinking about and is interested in all of these things. So we've got this product, and I have to tell you, with this discount code, which is welcome, I can't even see it there, welcome return 50, it's 25 quid.
What a bargain.
Reduced from 50, 25 quid. All you need to do is scan the QR code there. It takes you through to our learning management platform. 25 quid. I mean, what price is 20? Am I playing to quadrant type now? What price is 25 pounds?
It will transform your life. Why wouldn't you?
Of your team. So that's something to think about. I'm going to keep it on the screen there for just a little bit. But Angela, thank you very much for all your insights.
That's all right. Can I just say, look, if anybody does want to talk about moving forward, then just email us at hello@innovationbeehive.com.
Yeah.
Any questions you've got, anything you'd like to talk about.
Oh, and Angela, if you click forward one more time, you'll see my lovely animation.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. Look, so Angela, thank you very much for all of your insights there. You've been building on the profile and making it stronger, which is great. And it's now, I feel, a really, really useful and effective communication tool. So you'll see Joe has put in the chat a direct link to the program, which is, yes, just £25 if you put in welcome return 50 in capital letters in the coupon discount thing. Got to be worth it. But thank you all for joining. It's been lovely to see some old names there that I haven't spoken to for quite some time. So have a marvelous rest of the week. Angela, thank you again. And good, very good.
Thank you.
Goodbye all.
Zac, have you mentioned this profile's free?
The profile is free. profile.innovationbeehive.co.uk. And thanks for all your thank yous in the chat there. Lovely. And come and be sure to check in on us again next time.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
I don't want to
Thanks for
go,
joining us.
Angela.